So welcome everyone. Sorry for all of the delays this morning, but welcome to our simulated scenario, navigating concerns about knowledge translation.
All right, thank you, Sam. So to just remind ourselves, please, if you have a chance, be sure to mute your microphone when not interacting to help decrease some of the background noise and help with some of the bandwidth limitations that we seem to experience from time to time. Now, of course, when we do some of the breakout sessions later on, definitely encourage you to activate your camera and be a bit more interactive that way. But of course, if you don't wish to communicate via the microphone, you always have the option of doing so through the chat box. So in our breakout rooms, we'll have some facilitators. So feel free to input your thoughts or questions that way, and we'll certainly then relay that to our moderator. And then, of course, again, I think most critical, have fun and learn from each other's experience and collective expertise. Thank you, Sam. Next. So it's my pleasure today to welcome our patient partner moderators, Beth, Carrie, and Kent. As well as some of our who they will primarily be walking us through the scenario and stimulating some discussion among us all, and then of course our co-facilitators, Sam and Linda, who will be providing those supports during the session and help keep the conversation going. And then thank you, Sam. Next. So during today's session, Sam will start us off with a brief introduction to the use of simulation as a specific training tool. As a group, we'll watch a simulation that navigates through some of the common concerns relative to a knowledge translation strategy or a plan. And then after watching the recorded simulation, we'll break out into some discussion groups to debrief and walk through some of the issues that the scenario raises. And then, of course, at the end, reconvene and do a bit of a larger group debrief. Thank you, Sam. So with that said, before we jump into the session today, I just want to share that this scenario that we will be considering is a part of a series of as a part of a 4-part series that was co-developed with patient partners, which highlights some core issues or challenges when working through the various phases of a patient-oriented research project. The topics include finding a family partner, partnering with patient partners to set research objectives, reviewing results, and then, of course, the one we are considering today, navigating concerns around knowledge translation. Now, these are all freely accessible, and you can just navigate to the Holland Bloorview Simulation Hub, where you are able to sign up and gain access after just reading through some of the terms of use that are there. And when you sign up, you will be provided with a passcode, and that gives you entry to the simulation hub, and then you should be able to navigate and find the ChildBright funded scenarios on involving patient partners, and just of note as well that there is a manual that accompanies these scenarios that have some of the targeted directed questions, some minor background information that you can use. And feel free to apply these or use these in your teams. They were designed as sort of a lunch and learn type activity where you can then bring up to speed other team members and hopefully apply some of these learnings in your own work as you reflect on some of the ways that patient engagement or patient-oriented research is done incorrectly, and then take those lessons and apply them to your project. Thank you, Sam.
So I'm going to just give a brief primer about how these were developed and where they came from. So thank you, Pierre, for giving an overview of the simulation. So we know that engaging patients beyond traditional participant roles has significant impact on the research process and outcomes. And there's lots of benefits to including patients and families in research. And we know that they need to be involved in all aspects of the research process, from the design to dissemination. But while there's lots of benefits, and I could spend a lot of time on this piece of it, but I really want to focus on the challenges or those, and I'm going to borrow a term from Dr. Catherine Parker at Holland View, the crunchy bits. And so we've seen that researchers and patient partners may lack understanding and skills needed to engage in an authentic and meaningful way in partnerships, and that can lead to tokenistic, inauthentic, and failed partnerships. Yet there are few training opportunities that exist that support and enhance the uptake of patient engagement in research, particularly in an environment where both researchers, trainees, and patient partners collaborate to learn together. So while there are organizations and research groups out there who are developing innovative and comprehensive training programs, and I don't want to dismiss those, and those groups optimize success of involving patient partners in the research process, we have found that the majority of these have been designed to provide training to either a patient partner group or researchers separately. And there are a few exceptions to that, but these also tend to take the form of online modules or certificate courses. And so what our research team at Holland Bloorview wanted to do was bring to light many of the challenges that research teams face because they are complex and cannot really be easily addressed by online training modules targeted at one stakeholder group in isolation. So some of the core challenges that we found in the literature can include things like setting clear and realistic expectations, empowerment of patient partners to provide meaningful input, elicit meaningful input, and address opposing views or opinions. And although many other challenges exist, really the underlying themes permeating these challenges include things like trust, reciprocity, and communication. And although all online modules can be helpful to teach the basic principles of research, these relational challenges are complex, and didactic isolated courses may not be sufficient to ensure meaningful and authentic engagement of patient partners. And so to fill this gap, our research team identified two things that we could do to create these training videos that could be used by diverse stakeholders. So the simulation videos that Pierre mentioned. And so that includes training that includes patients and researchers together. So this idea of co-learning, and then creating an environment that supports trust and co-learning. And we can do this through simulation. So like Pierre said, the videos were co-designed by trainees, researchers, and youth and families through a co-design process where they brought their own experiences, and those experiences were used to develop the simulations in these 4 videos. So they do cover 4 topics, but there are many others that could be covered within simulation. And we decided to focus on the challenges or those crunchy bits that come up between researchers, youth, and families during research partnerships. So in this webinar, we're going to be zeroing in on the challenges within knowledge translation and really sort of debrief on what that looks like. So in the simulation process, you'll notice that the videos are challenges, and they're focused on when things go wrong. And so part of the simulation process is to talk about first the learning objectives for the sim. We're going to read a simulation scenario, and then we'll watch the video twice. So in the first watch of the video, you'll just sit and look at it. You'll take no notes. It's in the second watch of the video that we want you to take notes and jot down key points that resonate with you, things that you want to pick up on in a larger group discussion. And then after that, we're going to debrief. So the first part of this, and so we're going to be talking about concerns in knowledge translation. So the learning objectives are to construct appropriate KT activities to ensure the priorities of everyone are adequately addressed while ensuring the integrity of the research process is upheld. 2, develop strategies to successfully navigate co-authorship discussions with youth and family partners. Family has a typo there. And 3, have key discussions about the goals of the study, expectations at the beginning of the partnership to reduce confusion and disappointment. And so the scenario that we're going to be watching in the video is this idea of a researcher, a PhD student, and a family partner coming together. These were videotaped right on the cusp of COVID. And so you'll notice it is a Zoom call. And in this scenario, Mary, who's a family partner, has been working with Kim, who's a PhD student, on phase 1 of Kim's PhD research for the last 2 years. Phase 1 is a pilot study examining the feasibility of a group-based early literacy program for children with disabilities. The pilot study is complete and the results are ready for publication. Dr. Villampour, who's Kim's supervisor, Kim and Mary meet in Dr. Villampour's office on Zoom to discuss next steps for publication and knowledge translation. I'm just going to stop the share of my slides.
And sorry, Sam, before you get starting playing, just want to mention to the group that there's about 45 seconds of text with no audio. So at the start, don't be concerned if you don't hear anything. And once the scenario plays, you will see it's sort of set up as a Zoom meeting between 3 participants. If you have any issues with the audio quality coming through, do send me just a message in the text in the chat box. We can try and get that sorted for you. But if our testing worked, it should be fine. But you never seem to know. Perfect. Thank you, Sam. Yeah, thank you so much, all. It seems like, even though we had about 30 minutes, it's never enough time to really get into all of the great details that you start exploring when you start having these discussions. But with that said, we're hoping to use the next 10 or so minutes just to get a better sense of what it is that each of the groups discussed, hopefully explore some of those tangents a bit. And of course, if you have any general questions, feel free to lob them our way, and we'll try to explore that a bit more with everyone on board now. So I guess maybe if it's okay, I'll just start calling out some of our rooms. So how about I hand it over to Beth and Sam, if you want to give us one highlight of something that came up in your discussion, or is really anything else you feel like sharing.
We had a fantastic discussion and we came up with sort of 3 key points. So hopefully that's okay. The first one was wasting the partner's enthusiasm and losing trust because of it. And there's a need to set the relationship up better. So that was number 1. Number 2, there's harm when the partnership is done poorly. It's not just to the individual, but also to society because you lose those voices. And then the third one is that maybe the researcher wasn't ready to partner. There's a lot of internal work that we thought needed to be done in order to do this meaningfully and authentically and not cause harm. And this really ties into the idea that there is a need to train the next generation of researchers. And so I'll let my group chime in if they want to add on it to anything.
Perfect. Thank you, Sam. And of course, feel free to interject and tell me if you have anything else to add. So how about over to you, Linda? What were you all discussing with Carrie?
Great. Carrie has to step out, but I can summarize, and I welcome anyone from the group to chime in with that. We had quite a long discussion as well, which we started off with discussing how we felt while watching the simulation. It was complicated, uncomfortable situation, could be based on a misunderstanding. And especially when you have someone like Mary, who's such an enthusiastic mom, she has a lot of excitement when something works. And so we thought about how she might feel of her value after the interaction. She might feel like she's more peripheral or an adjunct member of the project, undermined in her role and feeling like the partnership is more tokenistic. She might not feel that she has an impact, and there doesn't seem to be that plan or from her perspective with the next steps. And she may also feel as if she's more of a participant instead of a partner. It could be that we were wondering about the context leading up to this point. Was the interaction more one way, like she was giving feedback and the researchers were saying that it was great job, it was really good feedback. Thank you for that. And thinking about how do we make this relationship more reciprocal. So now perhaps it's that part where the researchers have to give back and that takes a lot of time. And even think about what kind of way moving forward can she provide feedback, or what's her involvement like. So we have Francine shared about, let's say you had a validated survey, you can't give feedback on a survey that's already been validated, but thinking about what are the expectations and around the scope that you're asking for feedback or about the involvement. So what can be changed or not. For example, Alicia is on a project that I was also a research assistant on, project 3.3, with the development of an app. So think about what's the feasibility and what can be changed within the app and what can't, could be based on feasibility or budget constraints. And also giving an opportunity for our partners to contribute. So pushing forward those patient priorities, like Carrie shared about patient partners, we're thinking about having a cooking contest, which is completely unrelated to the project, but that's something that's important to patients and something that we need to think about as researchers. When I say we, is that flexibility and perhaps also that negotiation process. For example, Beatrice shared about a project she's worked on and where she about an intervention and how a kid wanted to bring back what he learned to the classroom. So explaining that it wasn't those steps that they will evaluate in the future, but what are the steps that he's already doing now, and perhaps sharing what are the next steps with validation without sharing and showing the actual tool. We ended off our discussion with recommendations. So think about perhaps asking for another meeting with Mary and acknowledge that was a misunderstanding, clarify the next steps with explaining around expectations, perhaps a negotiation, asking if Mary would still want to continue. And even I think it's important for recognizing, not saying no right away is what was done in the simulation, but exploring about more active listening. So what was Mary thinking of sharing? We don't know what she wanted to share, and asking her that. And even responding to the feedback about reassessing priorities and evaluation, renegotiating roles and involvement. We talked about recommending one-on-one meetings at least once per year, even if there is an external party to the project, to create that safe space for patient partners to have a conversation.
Thank you, Linda. And if anyone else from your group has anything to chime in, feel free to share. So on our end, with the discussion that Kent was moderating, certainly some of those elements or topics that were raised by the other two groups sort of did infuse into some of our conversation. But really, much of the content we came back to was this idea of transparency, and much of the conversation revolved around sort of what did or didn't happen at that start of that relationship between the research team and the patient partner. So how were expectations not fully clarified? How were the roles and responsibilities not fully relayed? Was there a clear understanding of what it meant to be a co-author? Was that something that was clearly delineated from the start? And really, and to follow up on some of the elements that Linda had raised was, there certainly was a bunch of missed opportunities for the team to get on the same page and ensure that they are delivering, or they are creating this ultimate output in a way that reflects both the needs and priorities of all members of the team. So we felt that at the end, like one of the more crucial elements that we could incorporate to help steer the project a bit more towards authentic engagement is to have more regular check-ins with the patient partners, and just to ensure that everyone actually is on the same page and know about the timeline, how the project is expected to unfold, and then how the various members of the team will be involved in implementing that work or mobilizing that knowledge in some way at the end. So Kent or the rest of our group, anything else critical that I missed in that brief summary? Perfect. I'm not getting any thumbs down, so that's a good thing. Perfect. So with
Sorry,
that,
Pierre.
Oh, go ahead, Kent.
I was just going to say, I was hopeful that somebody else from our group would speak up, but I liked what Linda said about relationship building activities. within the within the research team. I think that's something that everybody should do. And I also liked what Sam said about engagement readiness of the of the research team, because that was similar to one of the points that was raised in our group about this research team seeming like they wanted a lot of the benefits of engagement, but they weren't really prepared to meet their own responsibilities to that engagement.
Right, and I think that takes that discussion again in the direction of whether your partnership is more tokenistic than perhaps authentic. And yeah, no, I think that's why to me it seems to come back to the beginning when you are developing a project where you expect to work with and partner with patient partners, to do so in a way that is truly reflecting some of those core elements of patient-oriented research.
Yeah, I think our group noted a lot of harm because of it. We talked a lot about the risk of creating harm because the researcher doesn't know how to properly engage. And I think that we had a lot of discussion around that piece, but also researchers aren't ready to be able to handle that after either identify that they're causing harm, identify that harm has been caused, and then know what to do with it. So I think it'd be great to be able to provide the resources, but the researcher didn't know that they were doing anything wrong either.
Well, and there's a PhD student in this scenario, and in a best case, in a best practice sense, there is a responsibility on the part of the lead researcher to model best practices for the PhD student, and that's another thing that clearly didn't happen in this scenario either. And I think that's another domain of harm that has strong potential to have a domino effect down the line for that student, because if we're not teaching our students how to engage properly, then when does it happen?
And if I can just add to that, I think that that's something that we need to clearly be aware of, because there's a lot of new students that want to engage patients whose supervisors have not done this work before, right? They're the ones that are leading the charge. So how do we provide a safe space for training them within the supervisory environment that they're in, so that they understand where they are? One thing that came up in our session too is students, PhD students especially, are really focused within time constraints, within methodology constraints, all these things that they may blind themselves a little bit to how we can flex to incorporating these new ways that patients want to partner and do stuff with us.
And thank you, Francine. I think that's a very crucial point to mention, in that we do need to have those resources and tools out there to help develop capacity, especially if a student is faced with that sort of situation where they are the ones that are taking on the brunt of this project and trying to incorporate those various elements within their work, but in doing it in a context where perhaps their supervisor is not completely on board. So I think that's certainly quite crucial. There is I think it was one of our first or second pod session we had. We did outline some specific training tools that are out there, that are, some of them were freely available. So certainly, I think it would be great to consider those again and see if any of those might work within your team or within your specific project to help build that capacity within the various members. Oh, and I see Isabel has her hand up. Hi, Isabel.
Hi. I think there's also kind of a bigger systemic issue at play here, where there's funding agencies that are funding grants that require or preference patient partnership, yet they don't work into that funding actually resourcing the patient partnership. They don't work into it resourcing the training for the patient partnership. One of my jobs is to work within a lab to actually mentor and coach the trainees on patient partnership, and it works great in that lab, and they're doing excellent work. But that's only because the PI helps that work into their schedule. Even the timing of how research works, is counterproductive to how to work with relational patient partnership, which is key in doing it well. The turnaround times sometimes given to patient partners is an antithesis to how we do this work well. And the system of research, while requiring patient partnership and recognizing that it makes the work more meaningful and better, then doesn't change the system to actually do it well. So it's kind of a left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And I think somehow we need to, and I'm saying this, we as a big group, so I'm talking researchers, administrators, patient partners, patient engagement professionals, need to find a way to advocate to funders that if we want to do this work and we want to do it without harm and we want to do it effectively, we actually need to change some systemic ways that we're doing it so that we can integrate patient partners without harm.
And related to that, Isabel, if I can just add, I think part of what you've mentioned there also emphasizes the importance of patient-led research. Because I think another thing that's raised in this scenario is the potential ethical problems of having a patient research partner in this scenario who is also a familial beneficiary potentially of the intervention under study. And I think that obviously that tension between the priorities of the lead researchers and the patient research partner wouldn't be there in a patient-led research scenario the same way. So just more food for thought.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, I think I just wanted to echo some of those concerns that Isabel had raised, because I feel like it is certainly a systemic issue when it comes to when you are designing a proposal, setting it up. Oftentimes you are connecting with volunteer patient partners, who are not being compensated for their time, but the researcher and the the students who are working to develop the proposal, are being compensated. So I think there really is that critical need for seeing a bit more widespread acknowledgement of the importance of doing this right, of acknowledging the contributions of patient partners, and I think in that reflect that the timelines that sometimes are sort of put in place are not realistic, and you are trying to set the stage to build those relationships and work with your partners in a meaningful and non-tokenistic way. Perfect. All right. So unless there are any other thoughts, maybe Sam, you can just pull up the last slide that we have. Perfect. Thank you.
Can you see the screen? It's black for me.
It's also black for
me.
us.
Okay.
If not, I can just talk to the last screen too. That'll be good.
Can you see? Can you see that now?
The presenter notes.
We see the presenter notes.
That's so strange. Well, I can just say thank you. It's an acknowledgement slide for all of our people on our team. As I especially want to say a thank you to Beth Dangerfield, who has been a patient partner on this work from the very beginning. Thank you for being here today, but thank you for all your work on this project. Thank you to Carrie Costello and Kent. I don't want to butcher your last name, so I will say your first name and you can tell me later about how to correctly pronounce it. But thank you for being here, for facilitating, and your commitment to this work. And Pierre, thank you so much for allowing our team to bring the simulations to life today. And thank you to everybody on the call today for joining and for there was a lot of vulnerability in doing this work and being talking about our past experiences. So thank you so much for sharing and being here. And I also want to thank you to our funder at Childbright who supported this work. And thank you to everybody. So we're just so grateful that we get to be able to do this. And then the last slide, Pierre, which you can't see, I will let you speak to and try to pull up.
Thank you, Sam. Oh, no worries. So we'll follow up in an email. Yes, just echo Sam's sentiment. Thank you all for attending and sticking it through to the end, even with some of our technical hiccups we had. It doesn't help that I'm on vacation, so my ability to try and fix the issues on my end is a bit limited. But you stuck through it and we made it to the end, so I appreciate that. And so I just wanted to, before we sign off, I want to share the feedback survey with you. So if you do have a moment, please feel free to relay any of the thoughts that you had from today's session. But one thing I did want to highlight is that this sort of was the last session in our first series of these pods offerings, and we're just starting to work on the next 4 or 5 sessions, with the first one, fingers crossed, hoping to launch in May. But if there are any sort of critical topics or themes that you think are important to discuss with the larger group, feel free to relay those comments in the feedback survey, and we'll certainly try to accommodate those as we look to develop the next set of sessions. And just I guess secondary to that as well, we'll follow up with a short email, I guess, where we'll send this link as well. But just as a reminder that feel free to access these simulations. Of course, I'll provide the link again. Sign up to access these simulations, and feel free to use them within your specific projects, with your specific teams, and we'll see if we can start working on developing some of that much needed capacity in engaging patients within your projects more authentically. So with that, thank you so much, and hope you have a great rest of your day, weekend, and we will connect again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.